The rain isn't just falling. It is hammering against the glass of my penthouse, like it wants to break in. I usually love this sound. It reminds me that I am high above the chaos, safe in a box of steel and silence. But then I see him. A dark, crumpled shape collapsed against the railing, where there should only be empty sky and wet pavement. He looks like a discarded weapon, soaked through and broken. He isn't moving, but I can see the dark stain spreading on his shirt, diluting in the puddles. I have exactly 3 seconds to decide. The phone is in my pocket. Security is a button away. But the way his hand twitches, desperate and weak against the glass, stops me. I don't think. I slide the heavy glass door open, and the storm rushes in. I have spent 10 years curating this silence. My life is a blueprint of exclusion, designed to keep the mess of the world at street level, while I exist in the clouds. This apartment is a temple to that control. The floors are polished concrete that cools the air. The furniture is low, Italian, and uncomfortable. The walls are devoid of personal clutter. It is a sterile, beautiful void where nothing unexpected is allowed to happen. I built this fortress to be untouchable, a space where I could breathe without the suffocating weight of other people's needs. But as I drag the stranger across the threshold, I am dismantling that perfection with every step. He is heavy, a dead weight of wet leather and dense muscle that fights gravity. He feels less like a man and more like a collapse. My boots slip on the wet floor, squeaking against the pristine surface as I struggle to pull him out of the wind. He is a stark, violent contrast to the minimalism of my sanctuary. He is chaos in a room built for order. I managed to pull him onto the rug, a vintage silk piece that I probably paid too much for, chosen for its muted gray tones. Now it is soaking up rainwater, and the dark, terrifying fluid leaking from his side. I should be worried about the stain. I should be worried about the water pooling on the concrete. But I am not. I am overwhelmed by the smell. Usually this place smells like nothing. Maybe the faint, dry scent of filtered air, or the ghost of espresso. Now? The air is thick with the city. It smells of ozone, of wet asphalt, of the grime that clings to the streets below. And beneath that, sharp and undeniable, is the metallic tang of copper. It is the smell of violence. It invades the cool air, clinging to the curtains, settling in the back of my throat. It tastes like a warning. I drop to my knees beside him, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The exertion has left me shaking, or maybe it's the fear finally catching up to the adrenaline. I reach out, my hand hovering over his shoulder, unsure where to touch him that won't cause more damage. His jacket is soaked, heavy with water, and cold to the touch. But beneath it, I can feel the heat of him. It's a feverish, radiating warmth that feels dangerous in this temperature-controlled room. Suddenly, he moves. It's a small, pained sound at first, a groan that vibrates in the quiet room. Then his eyes snap open. They aren't dazed or glassy as I expect. They are frantic, dark, dilated, searching the room for a threat I can't see. When they land on me, he freezes. It isn't the look of a victim seeking help. It is the look of a predator caught in a trap, assessing if he needs to fight to survive. He tries to push himself up, his hands scrabbling for purchase on my shirt, gripping the fabric tight enough to tear. His knuckles are bruised, the skin split, and his grip is terrifyingly strong for someone who is just unconscious. Easy, I say, but my voice sounds foreign in my own home, too loud and unsteady. You're safe. I don't know if that's true. I don't know who he is, or who did this to him, or if bringing him inside has just painted a target on my own door. But holding him there, feeling the desperate tension in his arm as he fights to stay conscious, I feel a structural failure in my own foundation. My solitude was perfect. It was cold and hard and safe. And in less than 5 minutes, he has shattered it. The wind is still howling through the open door, blowing rain halfway into the living room, soaking the expensive silence I paid so much for. I have to let go of him to close it. The separation feels immediate and wrong, like pulling a bandage off a fresh wound. I stand up, my hands shaking. I walk to the glass wall that separates us from the storm. I push the heavy door shut. The latch clicks, a solid mechanical sound. The roar of the city is cut off instantly, but the silence that returns isn't the same. It is heavy now, charged. We are sealed in together, and the air in the room feels too thin for both of us. We can't stay here, I say. It's not a suggestion, it's a necessity. The silk rug is already ruined, dark water seeping into the fibers, but that's not the problem. The problem is that he is shivering, a deep, tectonic shudder that seems to originate from his very bones. The adrenaline that got him through the door is fading, leaving him exposed to the cold reality of his injuries. He tries to stand, but his legs are unreliable. I have to step in, wedging my shoulder under his arm. The contact is startling. He is solid, heavy, and radiates a heat that soaks instantly through my shirt. For a man who lives his life avoiding physical contact, this sudden, forced proximity is a shock to the system. I can feel the erratic rhythm of his heart hammering against my own ribs as we stumble down the hallway. My apartment is designed for flow, for the easy movement of one person, not for this clumsy, three-legged race against gravity. I kick the bathroom door open. It's a stark contrast to the rest of the penthouse. While the living room is all shadow and mood, this room is clinical. Floor-to-ceiling marble, white on white, with lighting that is designed to be unforgiving. I flip the switch, and the room floods with a brilliance that hurts my eyes. In this light, the stranger looks worse. His skin is the color of old paper, gray and translucent, making the dark circles under his eyes look like bruises. I guide him to the edge of the tub, a deep, freestanding basin that looks more like a sculpture than a functional object. He sits heavily, his head hanging low, his breathing ragged. I stand over him, my hands hovering, unsure of the protocol. I am an architect, not a medic. I understand load-bearing walls and stress fractures in steel, not the fragile mechanics of the human body. But there is no one else here. The isolation I prized is now a liability. I need to see, I tell him. My voice is steadier now, falling into a cadence of command that I use on job sites. The jacket has to go. He doesn't argue, but he doesn't help either. His arms hang limp at his sides. I reach for the zipper of his leather jacket. It's cold, slick with rain, and smells of the storm. I pull it down, the sound loud in the tiled room. Peeling the leather off him is a struggle. The material is heavy and stiff with water. I have to lean in close, my face inches from his neck, to maneuver the wet sleeves over his arms. I can smell him now. Not just the rain, but the man beneath it. Sweat, fear, and something sharper, like expensive tobacco and old trouble. When the jacket drops to the floor with a heavy, wet slap, he flinches. It's a small movement, a tightening of the muscles in his neck, but I see it. He expects pain. He expects the hands on him to be hostile. I'm not going to hurt you, I say, though I don't know if I can promise that. I have to get the shirt off. It's a black dress shirt, soaked through and clinging to him like a second skin. The buttons are small, slippery with water. My fingers feel clumsy as I undo them, one by one. The intimacy of this act is suffocating. I am undressing a stranger in my bathroom, performing a ritual usually reserved for lovers or morticians. He watches my hands. His gaze is unfocused, hazy with pain, but it tracks every movement I make. He is assessing the threat level of my touch. When I peel the wet fabric away from his chest, I hear a sharp intake of breath. His, or maybe mine. The light reveals the truth. It isn't a supernatural wound. There are no bite marks, no claw slashes. This is human violence, ugly and familiar. His torso is a canvas of trauma. A massive, blooming bruise dominates his left side, the skin mottled with deep purples, sickly greens, and angry reds. It wraps around his ribs, suggesting a kick or a fall or a blunt weapon. The skin is unbroken but swollen, the underlying structure clearly compromised. I step back, the wet shirt in my hand, looking at the damage. The architecture of his chest is ruined by the swelling. He isn't a monster. He's just a man who lost a fight. But looking at the severity of the marks, I realize he didn't just lose a fight. He survived a beating that was meant to finish him. He looks up at me then. The defensiveness in his eyes cracks, just for a second, replaced by a raw, terrifying vulnerability. He is waiting for me to recoil, to judge the violence written on his skin. But I don't. I can't look away. The brutality of the bruises against his pale skin is horrifying, yes, but it is also undeniably real. In a life built on sterile perfection, this broken, breathing man is the most real thing I have ever seen. I turn the tap, and the sound of rushing water fills the silence, harsh and sudden against the white tile. I let it run until steam begins to cloud the mirror, softening the clinical edge of the room. I need the heat. I need something to counteract the deep, shivering cold that has taken hold of him. I wet a plush white washcloth, Egyptian cotton, meant for guests I never invite over, and wring it out. The water is hot, bordering on scalding, stinging my own hands. It feels necessary. I kneel on the bath mat. The change in elevation matters. I am no longer looking down at him. I am in his space, within the radius of his heat and his danger. He watches the cloth in my hand with a wary, animalistic focus. His muscles tense to recoil. "This is going to hurt," I murmur. It is a statement of fact, not an apology. I press the warm cloth against the unbroken skin just above the bruising. He hisses, a sharp intake of breath through clenched teeth. But he doesn't pull away. I work slowly, dragging the cloth down through the grime and the dried blood. The water in the basin turns a pale, sickly pink. There is a strange, terrifying intimacy to this. I am washing away the city, the storm, and the violence, revealing the man underneath. His skin is rougher than mine, mapped with the faint silver lines of old scars that tell a story of a life lived without safety nets. My hands, by contrast, look pale and unblemished. The hands of a man who drafts skylines but never lays the bricks. "You have gentle hands," he rasps. His voice is wrecked, a low rumble that seems to scrape against the tile walls. It isn't a compliment. It sounds like an accusation. For someone who lives in a glass box. "I'm thorough," I correct him, rinsing the cloth again. The water swirls, dark and heavy. There's a difference. I move to clean a cut near his collarbone, my wrist brushing against his neck. His pulse is hammering there, rapid and uneven, betraying the stoic mask he's trying to maintain. He smells of wet leather and the metallic tang of adrenaline. But beneath that, there is something else. Smoke, maybe, or the distinct electric scent of ozone. It's the smell of a world I only watch from my balcony. He catches my wrist. His grip is sudden and iron-hard, halting my hand mid-air. His fingers are cold, but his palm is burning. "You shouldn't be doing this," he says, his dark eyes locking onto mine. The haze of pain has cleared enough for me to see the intelligence behind the panic. "You don't know what followed me up here." "The door is locked," I say, though I know how fragile that sounds. "Locks don't matter to them," he counters. He doesn't say who they are. He doesn't have to. The bruising on his ribs speaks a language of organized violence. This wasn't a mugging. This was a message. He releases my wrist, but the ghost of his grip lingers on my skin, a phantom weight. "You're involved now. You understand that? You touched the wreckage." I look at him. Really look at him. In the harsh vanity lighting, the divide between us is absolute. He is chaos and blood. I am structure and silence. Logic dictates I should be terrified. I should be calculating the risk, drafting an exit strategy, calling the police. But the architect in me is fascinated by the stress test. I have spent years reinforcing my walls, making them impenetrable, only to find that the safety I built is suffocating. Now, with his blood on my expensive towel and his warning hanging in the humid air, I feel a crack in the foundation. And God help me, I want to see what happens when it widens. I'm not afraid of a little wreckage, I lie. Or maybe it isn't a lie. Maybe it's the first honest thing I've said in years. He stares at me, searching for the flinch, the hesitation. When he doesn't find it, the tension in his shoulders drops, just a fraction. It is a surrender. He leans into my touch as I resume cleaning the wound, his head tipping back against the porcelain rim of the tub. The trust is reluctant, born of exhaustion, but it is palpable. The air between us changes, thickening with a gravity that pulls me closer than I intended. We're done here, I say, my voice tighter than before. The bright light is suddenly too much. It exposes too many things I'm not ready to admit. I help him stand. It is a slow, collaborative effort. He leans heavily on me, his arm draped over my shoulders, his breath hot against my neck. We move out of the bathroom, leaving the blood-stained water and the harsh light behind. We step into the hallway, moving toward the living room where the shadows are waiting. The storm outside has muffled the city, but the storm inside is just beginning. The living room has always been a space of calculated aesthetics, a showroom of shadows and expensive voids where I could hear my own thoughts echo. But as we step out of the hallway, the room feels fundamentally altered. It is no longer a gallery. It is a bunker. I guide him to the sofa, low Italian leather, the color of charcoal, and he sinks into it with a groan that sounds like a building settling into a new, unstable foundation. The leather creaks under his weight, a sound of accommodation in a room that usually rejects disorder. I move to the fireplace and hit the switch. A line of gas flames erupts behind the glass, blue at the base and orange at the tips, casting a flickering, restless light across the floor. It isn't the wild, uncontrolled fire of the streets. It is domestic, contained, and safe. Or it was, until now. The light catches the sharp angles of his face, hollowing out his cheeks and casting his eyes in deep pools of darkness. He is guarding his ribs with one arm, his posture tight, coiled. He looks like a weapon that has been fired and discarded, still radiating heat but damaged in the recoil. I go to the wet bar. My hands are steady now, falling back into the rhythm of hospitality to mask the tremor in my chest. I pour 2 glasses of whiskey. No ice. The clink of the bottle against the crystal is sharp, piercing the low hum of the storm outside. I walk back to him, extending the glass. Drink, I say. It helps with the shock. He takes it. His fingers brush mine, a fleeting, accidental friction of skin against skin, and the sensation is electric. It isn't a spark, it is a current, heavy and immediate, grounding me in the reality of his presence. He doesn't pull away immediately. He holds the glass, but his eyes are on me, assessing, calculating the cost of this kindness. Why? He asks. The word is simple, but it carries the weight of the entire night. He isn't asking for the drink. He is asking why he is here. Why I opened the door. Why I am not calling the police. I sit in the armchair opposite him, keeping a safe distance, though the air between us feels thick enough to bridge the gap. I take a sip of the whiskey, letting the burn settle in my throat before I answer. Because you were bleeding on my terrace, I say. And because the alternative seemed excessive. You don't know who I am, he says. It is a warning. You don't know what I've done. I know you had nowhere else to go, I counter. People with options don't collapse on strangers' balconies in a thunderstorm. He looks down at the amber liquid in his glass, swirling it slowly. I ran out of road, he admits, his voice dropping to a murmur that blends with the rain. I went up, because there was nowhere left to go down. I thought the roof would be the end. It was just a different kind of edge, I say softly. He looks up then, his gaze piercing the gloom. And you? Why do you live in a glass box 1,000 feet in the air? I look at the floor-to-ceiling windows, now dark mirrors reflecting the fire and our own ghosts. Because it's quiet, I tell him, the truth slipping out before I can polish it. Down there, everything is noise. Demands, expectations, the constant friction of people rubbing against each other. Up here, I can breathe. I built this place to be a fortress. I wanted to be untouchable. And yet, Cale says, using the silence as a weapon, you opened the door. Structural failure, I whisper. He leans forward, wincing as his ribs protest, and places the empty glass on the table. His hand lingers near mine. He doesn't touch me again, but the proximity is suffocating. I can smell the rain drying on his skin, the faint scent of copper and expensive trouble. The attraction is sudden and terrifying, a gravitational pull toward the very chaos I spent a lifetime engineering out of my world. You should have left me out there, he says, but his eyes are saying something else entirely. They are dark, dilated, watching my mouth. I know, I reply. The tension spikes, a high-frequency vibration that makes the air feel thin. For a moment, I think he might reach for me. I think I might let him. But then his eyes flutter shut. The adrenaline is gone, leaving only the wreckage. His head lolls back against the leather. Don't let them in, he mumbles, the words slurring into sleep. I won't, I promise to the room. I watch him drift off, his breathing evening out into a ragged rhythm. I sit in the dark, watching the rise and fall of his chest, realizing that my fortress has been breached. And for the first time in 10 years, I am not alone in the tower. Dawn doesn't break in the penthouse. It infiltrates. The light that filters through the floor-to-ceiling glass isn't the warm, hopeful gold of a new day. It is a stark, unforgiving gray that exposes everything the night had mercifully hidden. I stand in the middle of the living room, a mug of coffee warming my hands, and take inventory of the wreckage. The storm has passed, leaving the city below scrubbed clean. But up here, the evidence remains. The expensive silk rug is ruined, stained with a dark, stiffening patch of blood that looks like a Rorschach test for violence. The throw pillows are scattered. The air, usually cycled and scrubbed of all scent, still holds the faint, stubborn iron tang of the night before. I turn my back on the room and retreat to the kitchen. It is the only part of the apartment that still feels like mine, a fortress of marble and stainless steel. I go through the motions of the morning ritual, grinding beans, tamping the portafilter, steaming the milk, but the mechanical precision fails to soothe me. The hiss of the espresso machine sounds aggressive in the quiet. The chime of the silver spoon against the ceramic mug rings out like a warning bell. I am making coffee for two. It is a simple domestic act, but in a life built on singular isolation, it feels radical. When I turn around, he is there. He is leaning against the doorframe of the guest room, watching me. I gave him fresh clothes earlier, a pair of charcoal sweatpants and a gray cashmere sweater that I've never worn because it felt too soft, too indulgent. On him, it looks wrong and right all at once. The soft fabric drapes over his frame, hiding the bandages and the bruising, softening the hard edges of him. But it can't hide the way he stands, weight shifted to his right side to protect his ribs, eyes scanning the exits before they settle on me. Room service, I say, pushing the second mug across the island. My voice is raspy, unused to speaking this early in the day. He walks over slowly, his bare feet silent on the polished concrete. In the harsh light of morning, the damage to his face is vivid. The bruise on his cheekbone has bloomed into a violent shade of violet, and his lip is swollen. But his eyes are clear. The desperation of the storm has receded, replaced by a sharp, guarded intelligence. He picks up the mug, his fingers brushing the ceramic, and takes a sip. He doesn't wince. He drinks it black, hot enough to burn, without flinching. "You have a nice view," he says, gesturing vaguely to the wall of glass behind me. "From here, you can't see the dirt." "That's the point," I reply. "Distance is expensive." "It's a cage," he corrects softly. He sets the mug down. The sound is a dull thud that seems to echo. "You built a very expensive cage, but you're still the one locked inside." I want to argue. I want to tell him about safety, about the peace of silence, about the necessity of walls. But the words die in my throat because, looking at him standing in my kitchen, wearing my clothes, drinking my coffee, I realize he's right. The apartment feels different now. Before last night, it was a sanctuary. Now, it feels hollow. The silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's oppressive. It's waiting for something to happen. It's waiting for him. "I have to go," Cale says. The shift in tone is abrupt. The domestic bubble wavers. "You can barely walk," I argue, the desperation leaking into my voice. I don't want him to leave. The realization terrifies me. I want the danger he brings. I want the disruption. "You're in no condition to be out there." "If I stay," he says, leaning in, his voice dropping to a low, intense register, "the things that are hunting me will come here. They don't care about your doorman. They don't care about your glass walls. I am a contagion, and you are not immune." "Maybe I don't want to be immune," I counter. It is a reckless admission. He looks at me then, really looks at me, and for a second, the distance between us collapses. The air charges with that same electric current from the night before, a magnetic pull that defies the logic of the morning. He reaches out, his hand hovering near my arm, a gesture of almost contact that burns hotter than a touch. Then, the world breaks in. A sharp, buzzing vibration tears through the room. It comes from the pile of his wet clothes I left on the counter. His phone. It survived the rain, and now it is lighting up, dancing across the marble with a relentless, mechanical urgency. The screen flashes a series of numbers, no name. The spell shatters. Cale flinches, his hand dropping to his side. The vulnerability vanishes, replaced instantly by the armor of the fugitive. He stares at the phone like it's a bomb. The silence of my tower is gone, breached by a digital signal from the streets below. The morning clarity has arrived, and it is brutal. He isn't a guest. He is a target. And I am just the collateral damage waiting to happen. He sheds the gray cashmere like a second skin he can't afford to keep. It falls to the floor in a soft pile, a discarded remnant of a life he tried on for exactly 7 hours. In its place, he reaches for the leather jacket. It is dried overnight, but it dried wrong. The leather is stiff, warped by the water, the salt, and the rough treatment of the storm. It looks like armor that has been through a war, battered and unforgiving. When he shoves his arms into the sleeves, I see the grimace tighten his jaw. The movement pulls at his bruised ribs, a sharp reminder that the damage isn't gone just because the sun came up. He hisses a breath through his teeth, zipped the jacket halfway up, and just like that, the vulnerable man who drank my coffee is gone. The fugitive is back. I watch him transform. It is a physical rejection of the sanctuary I offered. He is armoring himself against me, against the comfort, against the dangerous idea that he could stay. He checks his pockets, phone, a lighter, nothing else. He has no keys, no wallet, no ID. He is a ghost in the system, existing only in the spaces between things. "I'll find my own way out," he says. His voice is rougher now, stripped of the morning's quiet intimacy. He is already practicing the distance he needs to survive. "I'll walk you to the door," I counter. It is a pathetic attempt to extend the timeline, to steal 30 more seconds before the inevitable subtraction. We walk down the hallway. The distance from the kitchen to the front door is only 20 feet, but it feels like a mile of wasted opportunity. The air between us is vibrating with things I should say. Stay, let me help, tell me who they are. But I am an architect, not a hero. I don't know how to build a sentence that can hold the weight of this situation. So I say nothing. I let the silence do the heavy lifting, even though it is crushing me. At the door, he stops. The heavy steel panel is the final barrier. Once it opens, he is back in the world of wet pavement and violent consequences. I am back in my glass box. He turns to face me, and for a moment, the mask slips again. He looks tired. Not just sleep-deprived, but soul-weary. The kind of exhaustion that settles in the marrow. "You did a good thing," he says quietly. "Don't ruin it by remembering me." "That's not how memory works," I say. He steps closer. He is invading my personal space again, breaking the invisible perimeter I have maintained for a decade. The scent of him, leather, old smoke, and the clean soap from my shower, floods my senses. He reaches out. His hand is hesitant, hovering for a split second before his thumb brushes my cheekbone. The skin there burns under his touch. It is a rough, callous touch, a friction that feels more real than the smooth, polished surfaces of my entire life. "Forget tonight," he commands, his eyes locking onto mine with a desperate intensity. "Forget the roof. Forget the blood. Stay in your tower, architect. It's safer up here." He doesn't wait for an answer. He knows I can't give him the one he wants. He drops his hand, and the loss of contact is a physical shock, like a sudden drop in pressure. He turns, unlocks the door, and steps out into the sterile quiet of the elevator lobby. He doesn't look back. The heavy door swings shut with a mechanical finality, the latch clicking into place like a vault ceiling. I am alone. The silence rushes back in, but it isn't the peaceful, curated silence I paid for. It is a vacuum. It sucks the air out of the room, leaving me breathless. I stand there for a long time, staring at the wood grain of the door, waiting for something. A knock, a shout, a reason to open it again. But there is nothing. Just the low, ambient hum of the building's ventilation, circulating air that suddenly feels too sterile to breathe. I walk back into the living room. The evidence of him is small but screaming. The mug on the counter, still warm, a half-moon of black coffee left at the bottom. The cashmere sweater on the floor, holding the shape of his shoulders. The indentation on the leather sofa where he slept. The air still smells like him, a disruption in the atmosphere that the filtration system hasn't managed to scrub away yet. I pick up the mug. I bring it to my face, inhaling the steam, closing my eyes. It is a desperate, pathetic gesture, but I need to prove to myself that he was real, that I didn't just hallucinate a connection out of loneliness and rain. 3 days pass. They are the longest days of my life. I try to return to the routine. I go to the firm. I look at blueprints. I discuss load-bearing capacities and tensile strength with clients who care about aesthetics. But the lines on the paper don't make sense anymore. They look like cages. Every room I design looks like a trap. I come home early every night, unlocking the door with a pounding heart, hoping to find chaos waiting for me. But the apartment is always perfect, always empty. I stand on the terrace, staring down at the city. Before, the streets were just a view, a moving painting of lights and traffic. Now, they are a threat. Somewhere down there, in the grid of shadows and concrete, Kale is bleeding. Somewhere down there, he is running. The height doesn't make me feel safe anymore. It makes me feel complicit. I am watching the world burn from the VIP section, and the guilt is rotting the foundation of my carefully constructed peace. I can't sleep. The silence is too loud. It keeps asking me the same question over and over. Is this safety, or is this just a slow way to die? The silence is a structural defect. That is the only way I can explain it. For 3 days, I try to inhabit the space I built, but the proportions are all wrong. The ceilings feel too high, the walls too distant. I sit at my drafting table, the vast white sheet of paper staring back at me, and I can't draw a single line. The precision that used to comfort me now feels sterile, like the clean, cold air of a hospital waiting room. I am waiting for a patient who has already been discharged. I wander the rooms like a ghost haunting his own life, touching the surfaces he touched, the counter, the back of the sofa, the glass of the balcony door. The heat he left behind has dissipated, but the disruption remains. My life was a perfect closed circle, and he broke it. Now the air is leaking out, and I am suffocating in the vacuum. I stop sleeping. The nights are the worst. I stand at the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass, watching the city breathe below me. It used to be a view, a distant abstraction of light and movement. Now it is a living organism, vast and predatory. Somewhere in that tangle of dark streets and neon, Kale is existing. Is he bleeding? Is he cold? Is he looking up at the skyline, wondering if the man in the tower remembers him? The thought is a physical ache, a sharp pressure behind my ribs. I realize with a jolt of horror that I am worried about him. I, who have spent a decade carefully pruning human connection out of my life, am keeping a vigil for a stranger who broke into my house. It is irrational. It is dangerous. It is the most vital thing I have felt in years. Then, the discovery. It is Friday night. I am pacing the living room, the rhythm of my footsteps the only sound in the penthouse, when I spot it. It must have fallen from his pocket when he slept, or perhaps when he changed. It is wedged between the sofa cushions, a small, unassuming rectangle of cardboard. A matchbook. I pull it free. It is black, matte, with a logo embossed in silver foil that has been worn away by friction. The Acheron. I know the name. It is a club in the industrial district, a place built inside the shell of an old ironworks. It is not a place for architects. It is a place for the underworld, for transactions that happen in the dark. I flip it open. Inside, scrawled in black ink against the white cardboard, is a message. Not a name, just a time and a date. Midnight. Tonight. I stare at the ink. It is a lifeline. It is a trap. It is an invitation to destroy everything I have built. I look at the clock. 11:15 p.m. I have 45 minutes to decide if I want to be the man in the tower or the man in the storm. The decision isn't made with logic. Logic screams at me to burn the matchbook and lock the door. The decision is made by the hollow ache in my chest that hasn't stopped since he left. I realize that safety is a coffin. I am tired of being preserved. I want to rot if it means I get to feel the heat again. I move with a sudden, frantic energy. I change out of my lounge clothes, pulling on dark denim and boots, layers that offer some protection against the weather and the world. I grab a coat, checking my pockets, phone, wallet, the matchbook. I leave the lights on. I don't care about the electric bill. I want the tower to be bright, a beacon, or maybe just a reminder of what I am leaving behind. The elevator ride is a descent into gravity. My ears pop. The numbers count down, stripping away my elevation, my status, my safety. When the doors slide open at the ground floor, the air is different. It is heavy, humid, smelling of exhaust and wet garbage. I step out onto the street. The doorman offers to call a car, but I wave him off. I need to walk. I need to feel the pavement under my boots. I head south, away from the manicured avenues, toward the river and the shadows. The city closes in around me, loud and chaotic and dirty, and for the first time in a decade, I am not watching it. I am in it. The Acheron is not a building. It is a cavern carved out of the city's underbelly, a place where the architecture of order goes to die. The moment I step through the heavy iron doors, The atmosphere hits me like a physical blow. It isn't just the noise, a thumping industrial bass that rattles the fillings in my teeth. It is the heat. The air is thick, humid, and smells of stale beer, burning clove cigarettes, and the sharp, salty tang of too many bodies moving in too small a space. It is the antithesis of my penthouse. There is no glass here, no view, no sterile separation. Here, everything touches everything else. I move through the crowd, feeling like an intruder in a foreign ecosystem. I am wearing dark denim and boots, trying to blend into the shadows, but I feel conspicuous. I carry the scent of filtered air and expensive soap. I move with the hesitation of a man who usually observes the world from behind a velvet rope. Bodies collide with mine, wet, hot, careless, and I force myself not to flinch. I push deeper into the room, my eyes scanning the darkness, looking for a ghost. The lighting is erratic, strobing red and blue, cutting the room into disjointed frames of motion. I see faces, but they are blurs of ecstasy or exhaustion. I check the corners, the spaces where the light doesn't reach. The matchbook said midnight. I am 3 minutes late. Panic starts to rise in my chest, a cold spike in the heat. What if he isn't here? What if the matchbook was just trash, a discard from a pocket, and I am standing in a basement club chasing a hallucination? Then I see him. He is standing near the back bar, in a shadowed alcove that offers a view of the exit, but keeps him hidden from the main floor. He looks different here. The vulnerability of the morning is gone, replaced by a razor-sharp tension. He is wearing the leather jacket, the collar turned up, and he stands with his back to the wall, a position of tactical defense. He isn't drinking. He is watching the crowd with the same predatory focus I saw on the roof, but now he is in his element. He looks dangerous. He looks like part of the wreckage. I start to move toward him, pushing through a knot of dancers. He sees me before I am even halfway there. His eyes lock onto mine across the sea of moving bodies, and I see the shock register on his face. It is followed instantly by anger. He pushes off the wall, moving not toward me, but toward a side door, a rusted metal slab marked "No Entry." He jerks his head, a sharp, imperative command. Follow. I do. I slip through the door just as it swings shut, cutting off the roar of the music. We are in a corridor now, a narrow concrete throat that smells of damp earth and rust. Before I can speak, he is on me. He grabs the lapels of my coat, slamming me back against the rough brick wall. It isn't an attack exactly. It is a containment measure. His hands are shaking, not with fear, but with adrenaline. "Are you insane?" he hisses, his face inches from mine. The bruise on his cheek is stark under the flickering halogen bulb overhead. "I told you to forget. I told you to stay in the tower." "I couldn't," I say, breathless. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but the proximity is intoxicating. He is here. He is real. "You left the matchbook." "I dropped it," he snaps, his grip tightening. "It wasn't an invitation, architect. It was litter. You shouldn't be here. This isn't a place for tourists. If the people looking for me see you, they won't care about your tax bracket. They'll break you just to see what falls out." "Let them try," I say. He freezes, staring at me with wide, incredulous eyes. "You don't know what you're saying. You think because you patched me up you know this world? You fixed a leak. You didn't rebuild the foundation. Go home. Go back to your glass box and your espresso machine and your safe, quiet life." He tries to shove me toward the exit, but I don't move. I grab his wrists, holding him in place. My hands are pale against his leather sleeves, but my grip is steady. "It's not safe," I tell him, my voice low and fierce in the narrow hall. "It's just empty. I went back, Cale. I tried. I sat in the chair. I looked at the view. But the silence, it wasn't peace anymore. It was just noise with the volume turned down. I couldn't sleep. I kept waiting for the storm to come back." He stops fighting me. The anger drains out of his face, leaving him looking young and terrified. "You're looking for trouble," he whispers. "I'm looking for the only thing that felt real," I confess. "I'd rather bleed down here with you than suffocate up there alone." The bass from the main room thumps against the brick like a second heartbeat, vibrating through the soles of my boots. Cale is staring at me, his chest heaving, the adrenaline of the flight warring with the shock of my presence. He looks at my hands on his wrists, then up to my eyes. The calculation in his gaze fractures. He realizes I'm not a civilian anymore. I'm an accomplice. The logic of his world, survival, isolation, speed, is crashing against the stubborn, irrational reality of mine. "You're going to get hurt," he breathes. It's not a threat. It's a statement of probability. He is giving me the data, the risk assessment. One last chance to walk back to the safety of the elevator and the doorman. "I know," I answer. And I do. I know the math. I know the structural weakness of bringing a storm inside a glass house. But the alternative is a perfect, pristine life that feels like a waiting room for a funeral. I would rather be broken by this reality than preserved by that silence. He shakes his head, a gesture of disbelief, but he doesn't pull away. He leans in. The space between us evaporates. I can see the fresh split in his lower lip, a bright red line against the pale skin. It's a new injury, earned tonight in the dark, a consequence of the life he leads. It should repulse me. It should be the final red flag, the do not enter sign on a condemned building. Instead, it pulls me in like gravity. I release his wrists and slide my hand up to the back of his neck. His skin is damp, hot, vibrating with tension. I feel the pulse hammering against my palm, a frantic, living rhythm that syncs with my own. He flinches at the touch, then leans into it, a desperate, tactile seeking of an anchor. "Then bleed with me," he whispers. He closes the gap. The kiss is desperate. It is a reclaiming. It tastes of whiskey and stale smoke, but mostly, it tastes of iron. The metallic tang of his split lip, the taste of the violence he carries, the flavor of the forbidden. It is sharp and shocking, a sensory overload that wipes the clean white slate of my mind completely blank. There is no gentleness here. This is a binding contract signed in the dark. It is a collision of two worlds that should never have touched. I press him back against the rough brick, my hands tangling in the wet leather of his jacket. He makes a low sound in his throat, a growl of surrender, and grips the lapels of my coat, pulling me closer until there is no air left between us. In this moment, the architecture of my life, the straight lines, the safety margins, the load-bearing walls, crumbles. The sterile perfection I curated for 10 years is demolished by the friction of his mouth against mine. And I don't care. I am building something new, something wild and unstable and terrifyingly real. When we finally break apart, we are both breathless. His eyes are blown wide, dark pools reflecting the flickering halogen light. His mouth is red, swollen, marked by our collision. He looks at me with a mix of awe and terror, realizing that I am not just a tourist in his chaos. I am a resident. "There's no going back to the tower now," he says, his voice rough, staring at me like he's seeing me for the first time. "I know," I say, running my thumb over the pulse in his neck, feeling the life surging there. "The tower was just a view. This is the ground." We turn toward the exit, not the way I came in, but the back way he intended, into the alley, into the dark. But this time, we walk into it together. We are driving north now, the city fading into a blur of red taillights in the rearview mirror. The silence in the car isn't empty. It is heavy, with the promise of the storm we are driving into. I look at him in the passenger seat, watching the road, and I realize the glass walls didn't protect me. They just kept me from living. If you've ever risked everything for a connection that defied logic, Subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to know they aren't alone.